Steeler Nation, we are back with another great episode of the one and only The Sick Podcast, Steeler Crazy. I am Jay York Football, Mic'd Up Sports. Shout out to him right now. He is driving to Jacksonville, so I'm just riding solo. But we have a great guest in David Sampson. You may know him from The Levitar Show, CBS Sports, and a few other places. So let's get to it and bring on David. Steelers Crazy, The Sick Podcast. Run it, guys.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast. Steelers Crazy.
Harris Smith shields. Flacco, Polamalu takes it home. Super Bowl 43. Pittsburgh might be bound for that thanks to number 43.
The sickest Pittsburgh Steelers podcast. Sports entertainment like no other. It's gonna be sick.
As I said in the intro, this man needs no introduction, so let's bring him on. David Sampson.
How are you? I was just watching your intro, and we've been using pretty much the same intro on Nothing Personal since 2019, a show I do every single day. I like your intro a lot. I may have to have Coca call your people.
That's definitely, we have a great production team. Shout out to the Sick Podcast, and we do the Steelers sector. So with that being said, let's get to some NFL talk. I know you're a big baseball guy, obviously, but love the podcast and everything that you're doing. So let's just get into it. Matt Canada departure, Arthur Smith comes in. Just talk about kind of where you see, the offense this year going into this season.
It's funny. There's only, maybe under 50 days left till the NFL season. There's
Crazy.
something about the Steelers and their fan base that I just love. The biggest news of the offseason has to be the extension given to your coach.
Yes.
And there's something I respect. So I'm the opposite of Steelers ownership. I must have gone through 15 managers in my 18 years running a baseball team. And there's something about the Steelers where they just like the idea of having a head coach and then keeping them and keeping them and keeping them. And I kept thinking to myself, what is the difference between me and the people running your team? What do they see about Tomlin that I never saw in my managers? How do they show that amount of patience when the results just simply have not been there over an extended period of time?
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't come up with any reason. Because whether he's a good guy, whether he's good in the clubhouse, whether he's great managing up and managing down, the reality is that when you're a leader of men, at some point your voice goes unheard. And that's just the reality, whether it's with players who are new on the team or players who have been there for a long time, whether it's with coaches who are new or have been there for a long time. This is not an indictment of Tomlin. It's the reality of term limits and why term limits are so important. So for me, we can talk about quarterback changes. We can talk about offense and defense, but we really, in my opinion, you start at the ownership level and go down to your choice of coach. And I think that that's the most telling thing of this past offseason.
Yeah, and you said it best, and it's always good to get a national perspective. We have a lot of local reporters, and the narrative's always different. They always come back to the playoff wins, but obviously we'll get into the quarterback talk as well. So, Kenny Pickett goes to the Eagles, and then we have Russell Wilson for basically pennies, and Justin Fields. Just kind of talk about the dynamic there and where you kind of see the ceiling for those two.
So Russell Wilson's a great name, and I think that he's going to get a lot of attention, and I think Sierra gets a lot of attention. But here's the problem. The Russell Wilson you have is not the quarterback of a Super Bowl champion Russell Wilson. Same name, same person, but not the same ability. And this is not to impugn him as a quarterback. It's that you pretty much get what you pay for.
Yes.
Think about what Denver did financially. Just think about the decision and what it takes for an owner and team president to look at a player and eat that amount of money. And I don't mean the dead cap money. I mean the amount of money they paid to Russell Wilson to be mediocre and now not to play. So the Steelers, for me, did a deal which is absolutely risk-free except for one issue. When they signed Russell Wilson, like when anybody signs a veteran who's underperforming, who has a big name, who's at the tail end of the career, do you want to be the last team holding the bag to release that player to basically end that player's career? Because if you sign a player like Russell Wilson at the minimum, you've got to be willing to not play him. You've got to be willing to release him. You cannot be held, basically hostage. Excuse me for saying that. It's inappropriate use of the word. I can't think. We're live. I can't think of a different word. You can't, when you're running a team, you can't think about the contract or the name. You have to really look at the ability, and it can be really hard. So that worries me. As far as Justin Fields, just in 20 seconds, he is a quarterback. Obviously, the Bears felt that Williams was an upgrade. Who wouldn't? You look at the results. You look at what Chicago's trying to do to get a new stadium built with public financing. They needed the new shiny toy. And when he signed with the Steelers, to me, it was great protection. Though your organization keeps saying it's not, Russell Wilson's not the number one. We're going to have a quarterback competition here.
Yeah.
Russell Wilson's the starting quarterback. There's no question in my mind. It's just a matter of how long they go with him. And is Justin Fields a better backup than the majority of teams? I would argue yes.
Yeah, and a lot of people say that he was mismanaged in Chicago, and I hope that's true being a Steeler fan. But then again, it's like, I feel like that the verdict's still out on that, because at the end of the day, like, he did show flashes, but we just need that consistency. And you know how tough it is. I would say I could count on one hand how many elite quarterbacks there are in the NFL. And I think, the rest, I would say middle of the road, mediocre. Would you say you kind of agree there?
Well, how many fingers do you have on your hand? Are you Antonio Alfonseca? Do you have a 6-digit, or is it 5, or is it like The Mask with Jim Carrey? Can you get to 8?
I'll give it 6. We'll throw an extra one on there. This is kind of a topic as well in Steelerland. Brandon Ayuk, obviously, requesting a trade. It doesn't seem like the 49ers, are budging. It's just been, it's kind of like beating a dead horse at this point, because, there's always the Steeler memes going, hey, here he is in a Steelers uniform. He's in a Washington Commanders uniform. Just kind of, where would you say realistically do you see that happening? Obviously, he'll go somewhere. Will it be Pittsburgh? Who knows?
Well, listen, as sure as the sunrise and the sunset, this is the time of year when the NFL players say, all right, I'm not playing for you. This is when holdouts start being leaked. This is when the players try to maximize their leverage to get to a place where they have negotiated some sort of extension, where they can negotiate some sort of playing time. This is a really busy time for agents as they're trying to take care of their players and figure out what are the landing spots, ignoring X and ignoring, shows, media, fans, ignoring all of us who want what we want. Realistically, in the front office, what's happening is if you have an issue with a player, you try to find a place for that player to go that makes sense for your team. It doesn't matter what the general public wants or says. But also, just because a player says that he wants out, the only person who basically gives into that and acquiesces is Derek Jeter. And obviously, how his reign running the Marlins ended up. And I'm referring, of course, to when Christian Yelich said he didn't want to be on the team, so they rushed and traded him to the Brewers. So for me, it's I never really cared when players said that to me, or they went public and said it, that they're looking to be traded or they want more money. I just would say to them, play. You're under contract, play.
Yeah,
and whatever happens will happen. But your job is to play.
I have to agree with you there. So a few more questions before we get you out of here. Again, appreciate your time and love everything that you're doing. So here's a question. You finish it for me. The Pittsburgh Steelers will make the playoffs this year if
the year is 2019. I don't mean to say that. I mean,
and why is that?
If Russell Wilson proves me wrong and he is a quarterback that, not by name, but by ability that I don't expect him to be, it's going to be difficult. The NFL, as you know, is the type of league where teams can turn around from season to season better than any other league. It's pretty remarkable how that happens. We dream about that in baseball and in basketball. It takes much longer. So it's hard to say never. But I'd say the biggest issue for them continues to be the quarterback position, though the names are far more well-known these days.
Yeah. That's a good way to look at it. So let's just talk about real quick the state of the AFC North. Where do you see, the Steelers in the pecking order there, and are the Browns still the Browns, and the Bengals for real? Can Lamar Jackson, get it done? Kind of just talk about where those teams rank in the AFC North as you see it.
How can you say that Lamar Jackson, can he get it done? I'm trying to think of a time when he hasn't gotten it done. You can say he's got nothing on his fingers, but this is a player who year in and year out plays and plays at a big time ability. I think about Joe Burrow. Of course, I'm focusing on quarterbacks because I'm thinking about all your fingers. And Joe Burrow, obvious questions about his health, but how do you have him? He's paid like he's a top 3 quarterback. Don't need a lot of fingers, but he has to be on the field. It can't, you can't be, in my opinion, a top quarterback without playing. And Joe Burrow's been in the league long enough that his name alone, not sufficient. He's got to play. The Browns, this is a more of a personal thing. I don't root for the Browns. I want them to lose every game that Deshaun Watson plays in.
Our fans are going to love that. Our viewers are going to love that because this is the Steelers Crazy podcast.
It's so telling, that organization would bring in someone like Deshaun Watson, and it would only be fitting if they went 0-17 every single year. My only hope for worse than that is when the NFL schedule increases to 18 games, and then they can go 0-18. So the Browns are just, with him at quarterback, the distraction that continues. We may have moved on to another story in some parts of the country, but within football, within the sports business world, the Deshaun Watson story is not forgotten by any stretch of the imagination. So for me, I think that the Bengals and the Ravens are real competition to finish ahead of the Steelers. I don't view the Browns that way. And I guess let me make this prediction. The best performing quarterback of Jackson, Burrow, Wilson will win that. But the question is, who will be the second best quarterback or quarterback tandem? And that's when you hope that Wilson and Fields together can put 17 games in a row where they can be there at the end.
I like it. And I always, I never want to, badmouth the Browns, but when someone else can do it, well, what am I saying? I always want to badmouth the Browns.
Listen,
the Browns are the
personal.
Browns.
I've been talking about the Browns and Haslam and how ridiculous their decision-making was and what eyewash it was that he met with his wife and children before signing Watson and how everyone signed off on it. And the fact that he gave him $230 million guaranteed. And you can tell after all these years, there has not been a player to have $230 million guaranteed. Not one. There's bigger contracts than his out there, but they're not guaranteed at signing the way Watson's was. That has provided a ceiling. Maybe, in fact, owners love Haslam for doing that because they look at that and say, that is like touching the sun. I'm not going to do it.
There you have it. Hey, before we get you out of here, I just have to talk some Pirates. Paul Skenes, been a Pirates fan since the womb. It's just great to have this excitement back and kind of, be able to turn on ESPN and, see the Pirates getting some love. Just simply unbelievable. Generational talent. The city's on fire right now. Skenes fever. Just kind of talk about, where do you think that the Pirates have a chance to, after the trade deadline, make some moves and kind of see where they're at? I know the NL Central is a little bit, crazy right now, so you never know, wild card or who knows. Kind of see where you see them second half of the season.
Well, the NL wild card is amazing. There's about 8 or 9 teams all within, let's say, 4 games, and the Pirates are in there. And my focus would be on getting Skenes as many home starts as possible. Trying to fill out PNC, and you can do that by giving him an extra day of rest, and you can talk about trying to preserve him throughout the course of the season, and I would do that in a way so he pitches as many home games as possible, because bringing that excitement back to PNC, which has always been, FYI, my favorite ballpark in baseball without a roof. It's been PNC from the minute I went there while it was under construction. And you guys are lucky to have a ballpark like that. I understand the frustration with Nutting. I did a live show in Pittsburgh for Nothing Personal. It was Nothing Personal Live with me in Pittsburgh. And I talked a lot about Bob Nutting. And I guess what I would say to the listeners of this show, don't let your anger with an owner or a team president stop you and your family or friends from making a memory. It's so absurd to empower someone like nutting, or anybody for that matter, to the point where you are giving up something that doesn't happen too often. And that is going to a big league game with family and friends. And then now in Pittsburgh, you get to watch someone who looks to be, as you're calling him, a generational talent, though that word is well overused in sports. He's had 11 great starts. He started the All-Star game, and he's dating a social media icon. All of that is true. However, what I would argue is that you never know what's going to happen with someone like Paul Skenes. Is it possible that he gets injured? Is it possible he is not the greatest pitcher ever? We had one, Jose Fernandez, and he passed away. So, and I'm not saying that's going to happen to Paul Skenes by any stretch. God willing, it will never. My point is, enjoy what you have and get out to the ballpark. And this is not me shilling for Bob nutting. This is me talking to your audience saying, look what's right in front of you and enjoy it.
There you have it. I think we'll end on that note. Hey, before we get you out of here, David, again, really appreciate your time and love all your work and everything that you're doing. Just tell everyone where they can find you and what you have coming up next.
Thank you very much. Go to davidsamsonpodcast.com. That is where you can find everything about Nothing Personal with David Samson. You can find merch for our show. You can find out where my live tour is. I'm going to be in St. Louis on July 22nd. I'm looking forward to that. You can find me on CBS Sports. You can find me on the Le Batard Show, on Twitter at David P. Samson. I enjoy this chapter. I ran a baseball team for 18 years, and I got to tell you what we both get to do. It's a hell of a lot of fun.
That's great. And one little so we're based, the Sick Podcast is based in Montreal. So when I told them that you used to be, involved with the Montreal Expos, I was a big Vlad Guerrero fan. I was very sad when that franchise disappeared. Just always loved the history of it and just the nostalgic. Just baseball is honestly, this is a football podcast, obviously, but baseball was definitely one of my first loves. So it's a pleasure having you on this show.
I can just tell you that I was lucky enough to be with Vlad Guerrero for 2 seasons in Montreal. Okay. And in all of my years, I've never seen a player. Miguel Cabrera is a close second. What he could do in the batter's box, it's just hard to imagine. What he could do in right field with his arm, hard to imagine. I loved watching him play every day. And I met his son when his son was a baby. And my God, was Vladimir Guerrero Jr. able to hit a baseball as a 3-year-old in a way that is hard to even imagine. So seeing him as a all-star now is quite something.
That's all great stuff. We love to hear it. Hey, keep up the good work, and let us know when you're coming to Pittsburgh. We'll have to get some crab fries at PNC Park, Chicken on the Hill. I'm
in. Take care of yourself.
All right, David. Thank you. Appreciate your time. Yeah, I mean, it's not every day you get someone like that on the podcast talking Pirates, talking Steelers football, just all around great stuff. Hopefully Mike is safe in Jacksonville. And training camp next week, Steelers, it's here. Preseason will be here. And we're just going to keep rocking and rolling on the Sick Podcast, Steeler Crazy, cranking out content, having great guests and great talk. That's what it's all about. Make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. We appreciate everyone tuning in. Man, this week has been crazy, just a lot going on, but we appreciate you rocking with us. I'm going to go get some sleep myself because I think I need it. Until next time, Steeler Nation, we'll see you soon. Me and Mike will be back next week. Thanks to David Samson for a great show and just some great insight. Until next time, stay crazy.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast Steelers Crazy on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.